week 12 this week for contextual studies. We're going to be starting the mock. Woohoo! So, last week we looked at how to approach the exam, we structured our written work, we looked through those stages. Remember, you did those flowchart elements where you rearrange the stages of how to approach your work and what you need to start doing before you even start writing or analysing, and that's understanding the theme. We then applied all of this to a redraft of Jenny Savile's Cindy. So you wrote your first draft, you proofread it, you would try to apply some of the things we'd learnt last week, and then you rewrote your second draft. This week we're going to start the mock exam. I'm going to go through the information you need, and I'm going to give you the timetable for how we're going to work remotely and get the right amount of hours in, and I'm going to give you the first part of the paper. Also, a reminder, Solar for Contextual Studies starts this week for 5 weeks. This week is week 12 if you're not sure. Solar's on Moodle and you're in the Group B heading in the Solar section on Moodle. You need to do your Solar each week because it's for the mock. And so if you don't do it, you're going to lose time. Okay? So the exam sections, we've got 2 papers that we do with the exam. Paper A, which is a lot of the stuff we've been doing in session. So we've been analysing artwork, we've been figuring out what a theme means and figuring out how different artists have approached a theme. And then paper B is a lot of what we did with the comparison, where we start to look at 2 artists and compare them and write it down formally. So if we have a look at the slide, we've got 15 hours of preparation for paper A. So this is split into 2 sections. Section 1 is 12 hours of monitored preparation, and within that you're given part A of the paper, you research the theme, you research your chosen artist from the paper, and you have to look at a range of their work that might be relevant to the theme. You're not just given one artwork. Okay? Then you get given 3 hours of supervised preparation. So normally within this you'd be monitored a lot more closely, and also in the supervised period you're not allowed to bring anything new in. So in that 12 hours of monitored prep, the orange, you're allowed to use the internet, you're allowed to use books, you're allowed to do primary research visits to museums if they were ever open. You're allowed to collate as much information as you like within that period. In the 3 hours of supervised prep, because it's supervised, you're summarising the work that you've done so far, and so you're not allowed to bring anything new in or add anything new. It's about using what you already have, summarising it down into the permitted size for the exam, and preparing yourself to make sure that these notes are going to help you in the exam. So there are some rules, and we'll go through those closer to the time, but you're allowed to have 2 A4 pages of summary notes. They've got to be bullet points, and they're not allowed to be full paragraphs of information. So these needs to be notes on the theme, on the range of artwork that your artist has produced, and any reminders that you want to give yourself of things you need to remember to do or things that you often forget or miss out or get wrong. So once we've done paper A, we'll then have the 3.5 hours of the exam, and we get given paper B for this. And so that's all one day, 3.5 hours, where we sit in a computer room in exam conditions. So you get given paper B, you have one artwork from one of the artists that you've looked at already, and so your fingers crossed that it's one you've already looked at. You've also got one unknown artist to compare with your existing artist, and that's where we did the Mark Quinn comparison a few weeks ago. So you were given a page of information about Mark Quinn's self and a picture to work from. You'll get given a brand new artist on the day that you've not seen before. So all of that gets handed in at the end, and we keep your 2 sides of A4 notes in case the examiner thinks you've cheated. So that's the way the exam is going to work, and I've done a timetable so that we have exactly the same amount of hours for the real exam as we do for the mock, so you get a real sense of how the exam's going to be. The exam that we're going to use for the mock is the January 2020 exam, so the students who have chosen to do this exam early, some centres do the exam at Christmas, this is the paper that they're doing now, so it's the latest paper that they've given out. Okay. So for timings, we're on week 12 this week. The exam is going to take us to week 16. We'll then have a few weeks where I mark your mark. We go through some more exam skills, we tweak the things that have gone wrong and have a few more practices, and then we start the real exam. Okay? So, week 12, we're going to be doing our main session on a Wednesday each week for the mark. And so now I've given us about an hour roughly to go through the mark, for you to watch this video, to ask me any questions, and for me to give you the paper on Teams. And then you'll have the other hour to work on the mark. You'll also have your solar time each week, so 2 hours of prep will be added on each week. And then this column on the right gives us the total amount of hours we've done on the exam in the week. So this week we've done 1 hour of mock prep, we've done 2 hours in solar, which totals 3 hours in total. Week 13 we'll do 2 hours of prep, 2 hours of solar, and that'll total 7 hours. And so each week we'll be building our hours up. When we get round to swapping to the notes taking, so the monitored prep, I'll tell you when that happens, and it's going to be an in-college week, week 15, and so you'll know when to stop doing the preparation and the research and start making your final notes. So we'll do 1 hour of that in our main session, you'll do 2 hours in solar, and so by the time we break for Christmas, we'll have done 12 hours of prep and 3 hours of note taking. So we'll have had the exact same time as we have in the real exam. We'll then have 2 weeks off at Christmas, and then week 16 we'll do the actual mock exam. So I'll give you paper B, and you'll have 2 hours in our session and 1.5 hours in solar. And in the solar I'll tell you how you need to submit your exam to me. Okay? So let's have a look at the paper. So this is exactly what the paper will look like when you get it. It has the title of the exam, the unit that we're doing, and the number of the paper. It tells you how many hours you have for the exam and when staff need to give that to you. We then have a page about instructions to teachers and tutors, and this tells us the things that we can and can't do. So it tells us again how many hours we've got. It tells us the things that students need to do in this time. So this is really important to highlight. You need to identify research sources. You need to carry out research of artworks. You need to undertake visual analysis, undertake background reading. So that background reading is contextual information that we've done millions of times, figuring out what's going on in the world that might make that theme make a bit more sense. Okay? That's telling us the amount of hours that we need to have, so 15 hours in total, 3 hours of those are monitored. It tells us about your summary notes, and it tells us the kinds of things that you can include and the things that you can't. So it tells us that we can include notes, images, examples of work from your research. Your notes can only be produced in the monitored sessions and may only be used during formal assessment. So it's reminding us that in the first 12 hours we can do any research we want. In the 3 hours where we're making the notes, we're only using the notes that we've made so far. Your notes and images are to prepare and support you, but you're restricted to bullet points. The types of information you can include, so it says contextual information, so that's all the background stuff that might be relevant. Not dates of birth and where people were born, remember, unless it's super relevant. Quotes, so they might be quotes from the artist, quotes from critics, quotes from people who disliked or liked the work or who thought it was right or wrong. Your own ideas and opinions, your visual analysis of the images, and you can reference specific sources. So if there's a quote that you're going to want to use in your exam, you're going to need to put down the source. So you're going to have to put down that caption at the bottom that you always include about who wrote it, what the book was called, what the website was called, when they wrote it. You've got a size of font that you need to stick to, and it's a minimum of size 10. So you can go higher than that, but you can't go any smaller. The things that we can't do are include continuous prose, so we can't include paragraphs almost that you can copy out in your exam. It's got to be really short sentences and keywords, and you can't include pre-prepared answers for obvious reasons. So it reminds us the kind of things that tutors can't do. It says that we can't give you any direct guidance or prepared material, so I can't help you to understand what the theme means. I can't give you any support in writing or editing notes, so I can't tell you that you need to include this in your notes but not that in your notes. I can't tell you to not include all of that useless information that's not necessary. You've just got to make that decision yourself and look back at all of the work that I've been marking over the last few weeks and the comments that I've given you. Try to use all of that and be able to edit your work yourself. All work must be completed independently by the learner, so that's why they make us keep all of these notes that you're making now, your 2 sides of A4, in case they ask to see it if they think you've been cheating. Your notes produced under monitored conditions must be checked to ensure that they comply with limitations, so when you've done your 2 sides of A4, they'll be handed in to me and I'll check them to make sure that they meet all of these rules that we've just been through. Your notes need to be retained by the centre, which I've just said, and they need to be saved, I think, for up to a year in case Pearson challenge any of the decisions. Okay, so this is the information for you. So a lot of this is repeated from the top, but we'll go through it anyway. So it tells you how many hours you've got, 15 hours in total, 3 hours of that is for making notes. It tells you what you can't do in the notes, just like we've been through. It tells us that we keep some of your work. It tells us that you must work independently and you can't share work with other learners, and that I can't give you any feedback during the prep period. It tells us that in part B you'll have a set task to answer, you'll get your part A booklet, and you'll get your own research. Okay? So this is our actual exam, this is what we're being asked to do. So this is really important that we make sure we understand it. If you've got any questions, I'll be in Teams for us to answer them. So they're putting a suggestion of why you might be producing the piece of work, a vocational scenario. They've said that you work for an art and design publication. The publication wants to write an article on how practitioners have responded to the theme of crossing boundaries. So that's our theme. The first thing we need to do is make sure we understand it. So if we go back to last week's slide, we have these stages that we need to go through in order to make sure we're prepared for the exam, and the very first one is look at the theme and make sure that you understand it. So before you start analysing artists or looking at the artist or choosing which artist you want to do, we need to look at the theme, make sure we really understand it, make some notes on it, make sure that it's really clear in our head exactly what we're trying to say. So the publication has suggested a list of possible practitioners, but has not made a final decision on who to include in the article. They would like you to pick one from the following list of practitioners to research. So you've got 5 to choose from. Each of them have a different specialism, but remember, don't just pick the one which you think is your specialism. Pick the one which you think you can most clearly write about crossing boundaries. The one that you think really clearly links to the theme, the one that you understand the most in relation to the theme, not just picking Sebastian Salgado because you're a photographer, okay? So once you've selected your practitioner, you should do these 3 things. So, visually analyse a range of work by your chosen artist or designer. So this is the first time you're being asked to look at work. Can you remember when I asked you to do that piece about disturbing the comfortable and asked you to pick your own artwork? That was why we did it, because we need to have practiced choosing artists who relate to a theme. So you'll need, if you've chosen Shepard Fairey, you need to look at a range of his work. You need to look at things that might be relevant to crossing boundaries, things where he's talked about maybe migration of people or of challenging things. So not just one artwork, because there will be multiple artworks by this artist, and that is why the examiner has chosen them. So visually analyse a wide range of work by your chosen artist or designer. Research the contextual influences on your chosen artist or designer. So why did Shepard Fairey produce work about crossing boundaries? Is it personal to him? Does it link to his life? Does it link to something that was going on in a country he lived in? Does it link to something just going on in the world and he thought it wasn't right? Why did he produce work that linked to crossing boundaries? And the last thing we need to do is identify ideas and context relating to the theme of crossing boundaries. So we need to think about, maybe if it were me, I'd look at all of the artists and think about how they've approached crossing boundaries, because it will give me some idea of the secret artist when I get paper B and what kind of ideas they might have had about it. So once we've done all of that visual analysis, remember at this point you can get all of your PowerPoints out, all of your notes that we've done since September, All of these can help you to make these notes so you can recap on visual analysis, formal elements, visual communication. So once you've done all of that, we need to produce our 2 sides of A4 summary notes. I'll tell you when this starts and we'll have 3 hours to do it. And they've recapped again on what we can and can't do. So that's the end of our exam paper. This is our only page of information. We need to make sure that we're really clear on costs and boundaries as our focus, even if that takes you 2, 3, 4 hours. Because I've said to you millions and millions of times, unless you understand the theme, you can't write about it. So please don't jump in and choose your artist and not have understood what you think crossing boundaries might mean. Because we need to be looking at our artist with that in mind. Okay? So as a reminder, we've got this PowerPoint will be on Moodle. I'm going to send you this exam paper now, and Solar each week is going to be for you for the next 5 weeks on Moodle. So Group B week 12, first Solar is this week, and then we move down. So Group A have got different ones to you because they're doing a different unit. So just click on the Contextual Studies mock exam each week. They're all on there already up to week 16. So they give you reminders about what you should be doing. They tell you how many hours you've had. They recap on some of the things that we need to make sure we're doing. So please make sure you're using those and also handing in work with the guidance that I've given you on them. Okay?